This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
I'm always looking for ways to show my cat how much I love her. And with Fancy Feast gems, I can pamper her whenever I want with a savory gravy on top of a gourmet mousse pâté. The pyramid shape makes serving simple, so all I have to do is peel and plate to make mealtime feel extra fancy. And with 2 entrees in every pack, it's easy to turn every day into the extraordinary. Fancy Feast gems.
I am Nicole Khalil, and you're listening to the This Is Woman's Work podcast. We're together. We're redefining what it means, what it looks and what it feels like to be doing woman's work in the world today, with you as the decider. From boardrooms to studios, kitchens to coding dens, your street to Wall Street, we explore the multifaceted experiences of today's woman, confirming that the new definition of woman's work is whatever feels true and real and right for you. And as your host, I know that not every woman needs or wants to break through the glass ceiling, but I for damn sure would like to see a lot more of us kick the shit out of that invisible, unspoken barrier. Which begs the question, what is really preventing us from doing that? You cannot convince me that it's lack of talent or qualification. Seriously, that's the dumbest shit I've ever heard. And I don't believe it's lack of desire or leadership ability. I am sure that access, bias, societal expectation, internal guilt, or lack of confidence may all play their part, but what is really happening and where is it happening? Because we need to know what the problems are and where they're happening to even begin to solve them. And what if the real problem starts way earlier than we thought, before we even get close to any ceiling, glass or otherwise? What if women are getting knocked off the ladder as they begin to climb? Here's the deal. Women outperform men in school, higher GPAs, more degrees, more master's degrees. So this is not an intelligence or academic issue. But the moment we step into the workforce, that advantage seems to disappear. And when promotions to manager opportunities start rolling around, for every 100 men promoted, only 81 women make that jump. And that gap, it compounds over time, keeping women behind long before we ever even get a shot at the big leagues. It is what our guests today call the broken rung, the single biggest obstacle holding women back from senior leadership. And after more than a decade of research, countless interviews with top leaders, and their own experiences breaking barriers, McKinsey senior partners Kweilin Ellingrud, Lorena Yee, and Maria Martinez have written a book that not only exposes the problems, but give women actual strategies to get ahead, whether or not their companies decide to get their act together. Their book, The Broken Rung, When the Career Ladder Breaks for Women and How They Can Succeed in Spite of It, is a blueprint for navigating the realities of corporate life, building experienced capital, and accelerating career growth, no matter what barriers are in the way. And today, we have one of the authors joining us, Kweilin Ellingrud, and we're going to dive deep into why the system is broken, what women can do about it, and how to make sure that you don't get stuck at the bottom. Okay, Kweilin, thank you for being here. And it's important that I ask this before I ask a bunch of other questions. And that is, what is the broken rung and how does it compare, or how is it different than what we hear about a lot, which is the glass ceiling?
Absolutely. The broken rung is that first promotion to manager that women are getting tripped up by. So keep in mind that most employees in Fortune 500 companies in the United States are at that entry level. 70% of employees are at the entry level. And so everybody's really encountering this broken rung. And as you described, for every 100 men, it's only 81 women that are being promoted. And when you look at women of color, it's 65 Latina women and 54 Black women. So it's even harder for women of color. And it's that promotion gap that we see that then makes the pipeline so uneven early on that the rest of the talent pipeline, yes, it gets worse with each step, right? 2-3 percentage points with each successive promotion. But it's really that first promotion, that broken rung at the very beginning of the career ladder that affects everybody and frankly holds them back across a career, right? We see the lingering effects of that 5, 10, 20 years down the road.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. And then it begs the question, why? Right? You're doing research on this. So why is this happening at that first promotion level? What's getting in the way?
Yeah. So the broken rung is the problem. I think the solution is what we call experience capital. And experience capital is the knowledge, the wisdom that you build on the job across a career. And when we did research across kind of 4 countries around the world, about half of your lifetime earnings is due to the education and the characteristics you bring to the job, right? Where you described women are excelling and have been for decades. The other half of your lifetime income is from the experience capital, the wisdom, the knowledge that you build on the job. And that's where women are not building as much experience capital, and they're certainly not getting kind of the credit for it given the pay gap. What we find in experience capital is that it differs by country. So in the US, it's a little bit more from what you build on the job, what you kind of bring in education, a little bit less from experience. In India, it's more what you build in experience over time. In some occupations where you've got a lot of education, let's say you're a doctor and you've had 12 years of education going into it, more of your lifetime earnings are from that education and less from the experience capital. But on the other side of the education spectrum, if you are a waiter or a waitress or a plumber, more of your lifetime earnings is going to come from that experience capital that you build over time. So that's really the solution. And each chapter in the book talks about how do you keep that learning curve steep across a career? How do you build the experience capital and get credit for it across a lifetime?
And are you seeing that there is actually a gap in women's experience capital compared to their male counterparts? And if so, in theory, if they're working the same jobs, for example, in that first promotion in your first 5 years, what experience capital are women missing?
So there is a gap in experience capital that women are getting versus men. If you take a 10-year period where men are gaining 10 years of experience on the job, women are on average are getting about 8.6 years because we have more career breaks and we have longer career breaks when we have them. Now, a lot of that could be around child kind of rearing years. It could be taking care of your own health, taking care of health or parents or in-laws, but we do have more breaks and longer breaks. We also around the world have the majority of part-time jobs and the minority of full-time jobs. So there's a lot that's going into kind of building this experience capital. But when you think about what's going on at the broken rung, that first stage, all of these things haven't yet had time to kick in. So that might be differences in flexibility desired. That could be bias, both unconscious and conscious bias, a whole range of things that are kind of happening at those early stages. And then, experience capital needs to be built across the career.
Okay. And then what can we do or what should we be paying attention to make sure that we're getting recognized for credit for the experience capital we actually have? Sounds like a 2-part problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I think number one is how do you build the best experience capital and kind of keep that learning curve steep at different stages of a career. And I'll talk a bit about early stages, right? Picking the right company, picking the right occupation. I'll talk about maybe medium stages of a career where you're sort of building skills, networking skills, technological skills, soft skills. And then kind of longer term things as you think about retirement and financial security, as you think about your own kind of long-term health, what are the things that you need to keep in mind? So that's the part around building experience capital. And to your point, the other part of it is making sure that that's recognized. And that's around making sure that you're both signaling that, making sure that you're building a network. So we know that women's networks tend to be more narrow and more junior than men. Women are more likely to have an all-female network, which given the seniority of women typically means that you have a more junior network. And interestingly, we did some research in Women in the Workplace a number of years ago and asked two, vice president, a male and a female, who were just promoted, did 4 or more people help you get here? In other words, have you activated your network, and is it working for you to get this promotion? And about 20 percentage point more of the men said yes. And there's this interesting research around women are more reticent and uncomfortable mixing networking and professional elements with friendship. And when we do so, we're more likely to wonder, is that a real friend, or is this just convenient from a work perspective? In contrast, men are much more comfortable doing the same. So if a man knows that person, they've been golfing together, they've had a beer together, I know that's a good guy. The deal is more likely to work out because I already know him. And I think when we are reticent to kind of mix networking with friendship, we're doing ourselves a disservice in getting that experience capital recognized so that we can network, find the opportunities, get that kind of next big leap jump. We in the book call them big moves, right? They're kind of job moves that really stretch you. But to get those opportunities, you need a network. You need people who know you, who are willing to make that bet on you.
So I'm kind of going to think out loud. So forgive me if I'm a little all over the place. On one hand, this makes perfect sense. On the other hand, it kind of pisses me off, especially right now as we record this. It's mid-February. There is a lot of things going on in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. So what I'm hearing you saying is having a strong network is going to be really important to getting promotions. And I agree with that. And it makes sense. And we're hearing everywhere right now that are people not qualified, are standards being lowered, or blah, blah, blah. And I feel like screaming, oh my God, it's because you golf with these people or have beer with these people. That's why you're getting the promotion or getting the opportunity. It's not because of your qualifications or your talent or your skill. And all of these programs are just designed to give people with the talent and the skill the opportunity to get an opportunity without having to fucking hang out on the golf course all day. Sorry. Is it a double-edged sword, or am I just overreacting? I mean, yes, it's important, and it feels sort of contrary to what we're hearing today. Thoughts? And please
Yes.
challenge me.
I think diversity and meritocracy go really well together. And I think they're both at their best when they're together. So it's not we want a meritocracy and that's going to hurt diversity. In fact, I think a meritocracy will help diversity, right? When we do research about why does diversity matter? Why does it matter on teams? Some of the research from Harvard Business Review is that diverse teams actually solve tough problems better, because everybody brings a different set of assumptions, a different background, a different way of working to the problem, and we challenge each other. So we can solve a tough problem that other teams have not been able to solve before in a better way. That's the first reason it matters. The second reason is actually dear to my heart, because I do a lot of operational transformations and continuous improvement. And it's that diverse teams are more open to the idea that they didn't get the best solution the first time around. This notion of openness to continuous improvement. How do we get 1% better every day, every week? And that just compounds over time. And so I think that is the value of diverse teams that we see kind of in practice. And that's what we want, right? When diversity and meritocracy come together, that's when they're both at their strongest.
Agreed. And I will just say this is anecdotal, personal experience. I have yet to interact with a woman, especially a woman of color, in any sort of high ranking position or where they're one of the few in their role or one of the only in a room, who hasn't not only done what it takes to get there, but it's typically gone way above and beyond. So the meritocracy thing, I understand, and it just feels, for me, almost implied when I interact with anybody diverse. It's like, gosh, they almost had a harder climb to get there.
If you've made it through both processes and environments that are not made for you, and if you've made it through that, right, gauntlet over time, you're probably pretty exceptional because you can adapt, you are resilient, you are persistent, and you've made it through. So I love the value of diversity and what it takes to kind of get through that process. And I think those things should absolutely go together.
Okay, and then for those who are beyond the established, like they might be heading towards retirement and have experienced the broken rung, or maybe you've taken some time out of the business, or what have you, what advice do you have for them?
Absolutely. I think as you head towards retirement, a few things to keep in mind. There is a financial knowledge gap. And women are less comfortable with some of their finances, less involved in their financial decisions. Interestingly, when you take away the option to say, I don't know as an answer, the knowledge gap actually kind of disappears. So we actually do know more than we give ourselves credit for, but we're not sure about it. And actually, it's not making a decision is, in fact, a decision in the financial world. And so when we are not as involved, we're not making sure that our money works for us. And if you think about kind of nearing retirement, one of the kind of misconceptions is, well, women live longer than men. Wonderful. So we must be healthier. But in fact, we're not. We do live longer on average, but we actually live 25% more years in poor health. We also spend more money on healthcare. And you add all of that up, more money on healthcare, more years in poor health, and lower average retirement savings because we've got the majority of part-time jobs and the minority of full-time jobs, and less active financial knowledge and decision-making. And that is not a retirement equation that looks good, right? That is what gets us to higher poverty rates for women in those retirement years. And so just being more active and more aware, both on the financial side and on the physical health side, physical health, mental health side, is so critical to make sure that those retirement years are smooth ones and kind of fully planned for.
You know how we're supposed to drink a bazillion ounces of water every day? Cute idea, but between work, life, and trying to remember what day it is, hydration doesn't always make the cut, which is why I love Cure. Cure hydration packs make it simple. Plant-based electrolytes, no added sugar, just 25 calories, and it hydrates better than water alone. And you know I love me some efficiency. My favorite flavor is lemonade. It's light, clean, and doesn't taste like somebody dumped a candy store into your water bottle. I use it on long recording days when I'm traveling or any day I hit noon and realize that I'm running purely on caffeine. And when I need more than hydration, like pre-workout where I need all the help I can get, I grab Cure Energy. It's got natural caffeine and electrolytes that get me moving and help me survive the part where I question all my life choices mid-workout. Staying hydrated isn't just about drinking water. You need electrolytes too. That's why I love Cure. It's clean, it tastes great, and it actually works. And for This Is Women's Work listeners, you can get 20% off your first order at curehydration.com/woman's work with code woman's work. And if you get a post-purchase survey, make sure to let them know that you heard about Cure right here. It really helps support the show. Don't just drink more water. Upgrade it with Cure.
Every who down in Who Newville liked the holidays a ton. But where to get great prices on gifts, they had no idea. None. They searched and they searched for great gifts under $25. Gifts for spouses and friends and even their toddlers. When suddenly one who shouted, Walmart has what you want, knowing they have Lego, Tree Hut, and low prices to flaunt. So they enjoy the holiday season as Who's often do. Cheering and shouting, Walmart has incredible gifts. Who knew? Find gifts they'll love under $25 at Walmart.
Purina believes no one should have to make the impossible choice between their own safety and their pets. But nearly half of domestic abuse survivors delay leaving because they can't bring their pets with them. Through the Purple Leash Project, Purina is helping create more pet-friendly domestic violence shelters so survivors and their pets can escape and heal together. Visit Purina.com/purple to learn more.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot. So my background is in financial services, and I've done a ton of consulting in the finance space. And everything you're saying is absolutely accurate. And I will tell you too how often when I'm working with financial advisors, how often they say that, the most common objection, or I'm going to put in air quotes, excuse that people give when they review their financial plan about taking action on anything that puts them in a better position or gets them closer to what it is that they say that they want is the I want to think about it or I'm unsure. And so I'm so glad, Kweilin, that you said that. It's like inaction is an action. It's a choice. And doing nothing is going to cost you so much more than doing something, even the smallest something. So I do think that there is a lot of opportunity for us as women to acknowledge what we do know. We don't need to be financial experts, by the way, and we probably know way more than we're giving ourselves credit for. And then also to get into action, even the smallest action towards what matters, especially as it relates to our finances. So being involved, making some decisions, setting aside some money, whatever it is we need to do. Okay. 3 stages of building that you talked about. So what
Yes.
advice do you have for young women who are in their entry level jobs, maybe in those first 5 years where, they're heading towards that potential first broken rung? What should they be thinking about?
Yeah. Early on, we look at the research, and each chapter actually combines research and insights that McKinsey has invested in over the last decade or so with success stories of women who have pivoted around these career critical moments. And early on in those first 5 years of a career, it's so important to pick the right company and pick a company that is, number one, going to invest in your continuing learning. So do they have a percentage of time that they set aside? Do they have an expectation? Do they have ongoing learning that's supported and feedback, et cetera? Second, they believe in cross-functional rotation. So it's not that you join in finance and 30 years later, you're still in finance, but you might rotate across to different groups, to different functions. That is important for learning as well. And the third factor of a great company is one that has a very clear strategy, and that is kind of winning relative to competitors. And you can see that typically in the stock price and kind of relative performance. But those are kind of the 3 outside in factors that we look at in choosing the right company. And when you do that, your odds of actually increasing an income quintile are 50% higher. That's actually the number one thing you can do to increase your lifetime earnings, is picking the right company. And I would say even more than the individual job that you're looking at, the company is going to matter, because the job and even your boss, right? Your boss might be your boss for 2 years. You might move, they might move, somebody, might get fired potentially. But typically a boss is a 2-year experience, and a company could be 5, 10, 15 years, even longer. And so choosing that right company that's going to invest is critical. A few other things that really matter in those first 5 years, making what we call a bold move. And a bold move is kind of a uncomfortable leap in your career that makes you a little uncomfortable in terms of the stretch skills that it requires, but really helps you grow and get into the right kind of trajectory. And we measure the percentage of skills that are usually needed in a new job. That's about 25% new skills required in the next job that weren't present in the last job. Anything more than 25% is what we call the bold move. And well-calculated bold moves early in your career, because then you have the rest of your career to kind of reap the benefits, are a big differentiator for those that over time earn more than the average. And then 2 other considerations early on. One is around the power alley. And a power alley type of job is where your company generates revenue, generates profit. So in consulting, it's in the consulting role. In a tech company, it would be in a product management role. In a newspaper, it would be in ad sales, for example. How do you understand how your business, how your industry operates, and how it makes money? Just under a third of women start in power alley roles. Just over a third of men do the same. And when you start in those kinds of roles, your lifetime income is about 20% higher. And it's not that you need to stay there across your entire career, but learning how the business works and then potentially rotating to other roles over time is so critical for your perspective and how it grows. And then maybe finally, there are so many trends underway, right, between aging and consumption shifts, and then now generative AI over the last couple of years. When you take all of those trends together, they are impacting our jobs. I think the good news is that there will be more jobs, in the next 5 years. They will be higher skill jobs, but they'll also require higher education in many cases. And so what are the jobs that are growing? And what are the jobs that are shrinking? And how, with a lens to where occupations are growing, do you pick the right job, then the right company? Because it's so much easier to make choices with the wind at your back as opposed to the wind in your face. And so the jobs that are growing over the next 5 to 10 years are jobs in healthcare, no surprise, given our aging demographics, and jobs in STEM, and jobs in transportation. And transportation includes everything from last mile delivery to Uber drivers and beyond, Lyft. But that transportation category, as well as healthcare and STEM. The jobs that are shrinking are falling into customer service and sales, so maybe contact centers, food service, so waiters and waitresses, office assistants, administrative assistants, and then production or manufacturing. And 3 of those 4 occupations that make up 85% of the job losses that we're going to have over the next, time between now and 2030, 3 of those occupations are female dominated, right? Customer service and sales, food service, and office and administrative assistants. One of those job categories, manufacturing or production, is male dominated. But when you put all of that together, that's why women are 50% more likely to need to change occupations between now and 2030 versus men, right? It's highly skewed in terms of where are the jobs disappearing. Luckily, there are more women also in healthcare. It's more highly concentrated in terms of female jobs, but that transition is an important one to make from shrinking jobs, hopefully, to some of the growing job categories.
Really important information and honestly fascinating. I want to talk a little bit about those women who are a little bit more established in their careers. They might have experienced the broken rung already, but
Yes.
hopefully it's not too late. So what would you say to them?
Absolutely, Nicole. It's never too late. And I think kind of empowering women to make those choices for themselves with the facts and the stories is the goal of the book. So for women in the middle of their career, sort of 10 years in, I think treating networking not as a bad word, not as a kind of unpleasant activity, but something that helps you meet new people that you might find interesting, learn about new occupations, new industries. And when you activate your network and are a connector, I think that can be really fulfilling. But equalizing the playing field in terms of your network, I think, is critical. We talked a bit about this earlier. I think over the next 5 and 10 years, there's 2 skills that all of us will need more of. And those are technological skills and social and emotional skills. And when I say technological skills, I don't mean can you code, because Gen AI can code better and faster than we will learn to in the next 10 years very easily. But I mean, how do you interact with technology effectively to do your job better? Whether that's kind of creating podcasts, whether that's being a nurse, a travel planner, et cetera, all of us need to use these technological skills and get much more comfortable with them. The other skill, though, is social and emotional skills. And those are, can you build trust? Can you build a relationship? Can you inspire confidence? Can you raise an aspiration? Can you see a human interaction and react with empathy? These are quintessentially human things, and generative AI, at least so far, can't do them very well. And so the complementary skills become more and more valuable. And so if we can all, across a career, build more technological skills and social and emotional skills, I think that puts you in a very flexible space to jump to different occupations, depending on what the need might be. And then finally, entrepreneurship. And I think we sometimes think about entrepreneurship as too black or white, right? Are you going to strike out on your own and start your own business or not? And in reality, you can show and build entrepreneurship skills in a big company, right? You can start a new product, a new initiative. You can kind of initiate things that didn't exist before. And so how do you build entrepreneurship skills and signal those as well is critical.
Okay. Kweilin, you had mentioned earlier about the time that we as women take away from our careers more than our male counterparts. I have to imagine maternity leave, motherhood is at least one big contributing factor to that. So how do we use motherhood to our advantage? Because I got to tell you, I never underestimate a mom's ability to get something done, right? Like talk about leadership skills or, influencing skills. So how do we make motherhood, as you said, experience capital? How do we include that in it or use it to our advantage when it comes to our careers, not having it be seen as this thing that's detracting or taking away from it?
Absolutely. Yeah, the ability of mothers to multitask and kind of manage so many things at once is incredible. I think it's around planning. What happens before, let's say, a maternity leave, during a maternity leave, afterwards as you on-ramp? How can you plan to build experience capital during those periods? How do you recognize the skills that you've built, whether that's multitasking or negotiating with a toddler is an extreme skill that can actually be applied to the workplace. But what are these skills that you're building, and how do you use them to increase your momentum as you're coming back from a maternity leave, as opposed to allow that to slow you down? We also talk about, though, the motherhood penalty and the fatherhood bonus. So women, when they have children, and the penalty is more extreme with more children, can expect lower lifetime earnings. Men can expect actually more income. They're perceived as more mature, more stable, more reliable when they have children and more children. And we see this in the numbers kind of globally. How do we both understand that data and counteract that? Because when we give two identical resumes, John Doe and Jane Doe, exactly identical font type, font size, bullet points, and all we change is one bullet point that says active parent-teacher association member for that woman, I think she's something like 87% less likely to get the job. She's also less likely to get promoted. And that's because there's this strong parenthood penalty. Men and women will doubt that she will be as dedicated of an employee because she is a dedicated parent. And so that association is a real challenge to overcome, and just being aware of the facts as you plan for motherhood and maternity leave can really shift some of that dynamic. And then we actually explore bias more broadly, and that's unconscious bias in the example of this kind of parenthood resume, but also conscious bias, external bias, right? When somebody sees you, what do they think and what do they ascribe to you? But also internal bias. How have we internalized some of the assumptions around leadership and what that looks like, potential, and what people are capable of going forward? So the bias chapter is quite useful, both as a woman in the workplace, but also as an ally. If you're a male colleague and you want to learn how to be a better, more proactive ally, I think that chapter in particular is really valuable, just to name the biases and then get practical about strategies that you can take when you see this in action. What do you do to confront it and minimize some of those biases?
Yeah, I love that you have a chapter with tools and tips that we can use when we face bias, because it's called unconscious bias for a reason. And so I think I would imagine the first step is naming it or knowing it. There has to be some element of defensiveness that happens for a lot of people. So navigating through that and then advocating for yourself. I think what you just said about the bias of motherhood not being the same, or parenthood not being the same, it's interesting, the bias in both directions. So like if my husband puts that he's, my kid's basketball coach on his resume, which he wouldn't, but let's just say the bias is that he gets the credit of still being career committed, where the reality is his family is absolutely more important than his work. No doubts about it. And I would imagine that that is true for a lot of fathers, many fathers, most fathers, at least the good ones. Whereas, women, of course, our families are more important than our jobs. Come on. I mean, that's true. That should be true for all of us. And yet, I still see so many moms bring so much to their careers, to their professions, to their purposes. So can you give us maybe some tactical tips specifically to this bias of some things that we could do, say, or think to help change the bias in both directions?
Absolutely. So I think, one, you can kind of normalize talking about it. And that may be some of our male colleagues talking about it more frequently so that it's kind of accepted and normal. I also think what women can do is appreciate and recognize the bias in each of us internally. So you can go online to the implicit association test and understand that when you more quickly associate the word family with women, you're also more likely to prefer an equally qualified man for the job than a woman. And that happens for men, that happens for women, right? We all have bias internalized, and it's more important to just understand on what dimensions of gender, race, socioeconomic level, et cetera, education, age, right? What are all of the dimensions that are most strong for you so that we can recognize it in ourselves, as you said, make the unconscious conscious, and then work systematically to reduce it.
And what was that website again? I want to make sure to put that in show
The
notes.
implicit association test online. It's a free association test and lots of different dimensions of gender, race, age, etc.
All right. Friends, we're going to add that in show notes. I know I'm going to go do it because I'm very aware we all have bias. Like that's just the deal. And it's not necessarily always a bad thing. It's more just the making the unconscious conscious, being aware and deciding, is this a bias that works for me? Is this one I want to keep? Is this one that it has me practicing empathy for other people? And if the answer is no, then we have the opportunity to do something about it, right?
Absolutely, Nicole. And the question I ask myself is, so I had that first reaction. And I think this saying of, you're not necessarily responsible for your first reaction or thought, but you are responsible for your second thought is important. And so then I ask myself, would I have had that same reaction if that were an older white man? Would I have had that same reaction if that were a younger Black woman, right? And just exploring the dimensions of what was that reaction in me, because we all have kind of mental shortcuts that have served us well through evolution. But what was that, and how do I get underneath that to explore better and make sure that that was a valid kind of quick reaction?
Yeah. So great tips in there. One thing that I have been practicing is when I get upset about somebody doing something that I disagree with, I often ask myself how I would feel if somebody I agreed with did it. And that is a really good way for me to determine whether or not how I feel about the thing versus whether or not I have a bias about who's doing the thing.
That's a great tip.
And it's fascinating how often I'm like, shit, I'd be okay with it if I agreed with the person. So, okay, now I got to get myself together. But anyway, Kweilin, a fascinating conversation. Thank you for the incredible work that the three of you did and for writing this book. Again, it is called The Broken Rung. You can go to brokenrunbook.com. We'll put the link to that, the implicit association test, and all other ways to find and follow Kweilin and the book in show notes. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Nicole. My pleasure.
All right, friend. No one is saying that you have to climb the corporate ladder. If you'd rather build your own, take an entirely different route, or set the whole structure on fire and start fresh, I support you. Hell, I applaud you. But for those of you who want to climb, that do want a seat at that table, the absolute bare minimum expectation should be that your ladder is solid. It reaches as high and that all the rungs are as secure as the next guy's. And while I'm not the decider of what woman's work looks like for you or for any other woman but me, I am the decider of what we stand for on this podcast. So let me be clear. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is absolutely woman's work because woman's work is both individual and collective. We choose for ourselves and we stand for other women to be able to do the same. That's it. That's the deal. So climb. I know it's hard. I know it can be frustrating, disheartening, and exhausting, but climb anyway. And know that we'll be holding the ladder for you because that is woman's work.